committee. We'll start with the current year.
Tēnā tātou I te whānau. Atamari e kia tātou katoa. Hiritia hekitia I te runga mai whiti o tēnei wānanga, tukua kia e, tukua kia oi, ko rangi nui ki runga, ko papatuanuku ki raro, tūturu o whiti whakamaua kia tīna.
Tēnā.
Haumi e, hui e, hatai ki e.
Right, apologies, I think we've got a full vote, haven't we?
Something else today?
Uh,
Yeah. Can I put my apology from 11:30 onwards? I've got a few more to go to.
I'll get here early.
Yeah.
And I made the same for now.
Those, right, declarations of conflicts of interest, any of those? Right, standing orders, I move that we suspend the normal speaking orders. We do that on a permanent basis, what are we?
I'll get some advice.
I move that they be suspended. Second it. Over. Agreed. Confirmation of minutes of November 24. Everyone had a look through them. Any problems? Second. Read it. Over.
Aye.
Agreed. Right. Report sections 6.1 resolution monitoring report.
Right, thank you, Ms. Chair. Noting we've got 3 items in there. The Tikakino Road water treatment plant relocation. Again, progressing well. We've got an update on the big water story on that one. Forward to seeing work get underway, hopefully in March. Local water done well. There was a late report that was due in this paper that I'll be providing an update later in workshop on, but councillors can expect a further substantial update in the very near future. And also just noting that final one in there that's complete. Just again, we've got an update on workshop about the successful transfer to the weight-based charging system. So again, happy to take any questions on those 3, but noting you've got updates further in today's agenda.
A comment? Recommendation is that committee takes the resolution monitoring report. Move it. Over. 6.2 half yearly financial results for 2025. Chamberlain.
Good morning, councillors. What you have in front of you is a financial snapshot of what the half-yearly results are for council. Council has a June balance date, so the half-yearly results run from July 24 through to December 24. What they show is a surplus of 5.9 million for that period. But the caveat with that is that council has had quite a significant amount of external revenue and costs associated with that, which have distorted the results quite significantly. So what I have done is on the bottom of page 15 is put together a table showing what the 5.9 million surplus looks like, and then backing out things like roading recovery, the infrastructure acceleration fund, better off funding, etc. And what that shows is that actually, when you back all those out and just look at the underlying business of council, which is what we rate for, that it's got a surplus of only 100,000 for the year. So basically, council's breaking even, which is essentially what your rates are designed to do, is to basically cover our costs and not generate a big surplus. The caveat with, again, caveating a caveat, is that the council does need to make a small surplus because it has to reinvest back into its assets. And if it was just covering its operating costs, it would never be able to replace assets like water pipes and roads as they wear out. So there is the responsibility to generate enough of a surplus to be able to maintain the level of its assets. Two of our cost centres in particular are performing slightly below desired expectations. And this is to do with the New Zealand economy as a whole. And I've highlighted those there for you on page 16. The first is consenting. So consenting is both land use and building consenting. I've rolled the two together here in this report. And I've added some tables there just to give you some context. So back in 2021, the New Zealand economy was doing very well and consenting was running probably hotter than normal. So the volumes were high. And you can see there that the number of the number of consents, or the dollar value of the consents that we were issuing back in 2021 was about $1 million between the two. That has been steadily dropping over the last 3 years. And so far this year, we've only generated 300,000. So if we continue at that rate, that will only generate about 600,000, which is quite a bit down from the $1 million that we were doing 3 years ago. And obviously that's having an impact because yes, we do have some variable costs, and those variable costs can be pulled back to match the revenue, but we also have some fixed overheads, and those fixed overheads are there regardless of what the volumes are doing. And this is what's causing problems in the consenting area, is basically generating enough of a surplus from the small amount of volume that we're doing to cover those fixed overheads. You can also see there's a bit of a discussion there around what we're doing about those. And we've been in discussions with another council who, for various reasons, is got a surplus of consenting activity compared to what they're staffed up to do. And we're going to provide some additional help for them in return for a fee, which will give us a little bit of extra revenue while our volumes are down. So that's a good thing, and that'll kick in for the second half of this financial year. So it should help to close the gap this year and will help fill the gap for the following year. Solid waste is the other one that's down. And again, this is partly due to the economy. Because there's not a lot of construction going on, there's not a lot of demolition waste. And so that demolition waste is obviously not coming into the landfill, but we're also reliant on a neighbouring council to send their waste our way, and their volumes have been down as well. So for context, 2 years ago, we did just under 6,000 tonne, and this year we're doing about 4,500 tonne. So the volume coming into landfill has declined, and obviously that is then matched by a decline in revenue. The good news with this one is that we have also been able to pull our costs back, and we are broadly break even in our landfill operation at the moment, which means that actually while volumes are down, we're managing to match costs to keep that one at a sort of a break even. Over the page, there's a number of graphs there that show how we're going in terms of operating income and operating expenses by the various activities that we're doing. The one that I thought I would spend a little bit more time on is the capital graphs on page 18. So capital is an area that council can adjust what it's doing to match its revenue. And you'll see there that what I have done is I have light blue graphs that actually show what were. The dark blue graphs are showing what we're actually delivering. So you can see that we're delivering slightly less than budget. And then I have added some green graphs. So again, the dark green graph is the full year budget, and the light green graph is what we think we're going to deliver at the end of the financial year. So that's 6 months actuals and 6 months forecast. And what you'll see that, and other than in land transport, we are delivering quite a bit less, particularly in the waters area. And this is because we have been rephasing and rescheduling what we think we're actually going to deliver this financial year in terms of that second supply and reservoir program. With the EMO team have been busy in the design phase, but the actual construction is only happening in the second half of the year, and that's where the costs are going to come. Any questions on that? Over the page on page 19, there's a little bit of information there about our treasury management. So it shows that during this financial year, so the first 6 months, we've borrowed a further $4 million net. You'll see that actually we have repaid $8 million of loans and drawn 12 million of new loans. So 8 million of that 12 million is just refinancing. We've also been active in the swap market. So this is interest rate swaps. So it's something that you wouldn't normally deal with as a residential homeowner, but it's what council uses to turn a floating loan into a fixed loan. So basically it's swapping floating interest rate for a fixed interest rate. And the markets, the financial markets have been forecasting the OCR drops that we've been seeing recently and have predicted future drops. And because of that, the futures market, which is where we've been buying these swaps, are reflecting where they think the market will go. And you'll see that that's allowed council to lock in a whole lot of interest rates that will come into play in the next few months at sub 4%. So that means that we're able to swap those floating interest rates, which are currently mid to high fives, with a 4. And it's meant that the average cost of funds to council at the moment is sitting at 4.8, and that's expected to drop even further as these swaps come into play. We're fully compliant with our treasury policy, and I think that's probably all the highlights of the half-year results, but happy to take any questions.
Councillor Aitken.
Couple of questions. Waste, you said it's down 1,500 tonnes roughly. How many carbon credits have we currently got, and are we having to buy more next?
So at the moment, we're not buying any carbon credits. We took out some forward contracts for carbon credits to lock in prices as the carbon credit market started dropping, which means that actually, and we were buying those based on the previous volume. So actually, if anything, we've probably got more carbon credits coming in the future than we possibly need based on these volumes. So I think we're physically holding about 4,000 carbon credits at the moment, but we've got some forward contracts to settle future liabilities, lock those prices in so that we can set the gate fee.
And the other question is bad debts. Where are we tracking with bad debts?
In terms of bad debts, the biggest debtors that we've got are actually our ratepayers, and they're secured over people's properties and homes. So we haven't had any significant change in bad debts in terms of rates. We are seeing distress in some of our ratepayers, but not it's not resulting in bad debts to council at this point.
Sorry, I should have emailed you this question, but I only just thought about it. Is there any chance that we can actually have a quick email at some stage to show us what the bad debts are?
Just following on from that, we're tracking 100,000 behind in rates. Is there some sort of trend developing there?
Most of that is in water rates, and most of that is in the metered component of that. So in December, we had a bit of a spike in our water revenue because it was dry, and we started seeing people buying tankered water and that sort of stuff, which pushed our volumes up. But then we had that really wet period in January, and that's all, I was going to say dried up, but it's slowed down because the farmers and so on's tanks are relatively full at the moment. So it's in that metered volumetric charging area that we're seeing fluctuations, and it's weather dependent largely.
The other concerning one is the development contributions.
Correct, and development contributions are linked to consenting, because if you don't have people consenting properties, you don't get the development contribution. So it's a
Following on with the consenting, first number in the table back in 21, so when it was at its peak, but planning was coming up with changes and that sort of thing. So if we were to wind the clock back another 2 years from that, are we sort of back at the same levels as 2019?
I don't have that information in front of me. I would need to do some research on that. But certainly 2021, that was the biggest volumes in the period that I've been.
Councillor Byrne.
Just in the solid waste, when you look from our neighbouring council, we were expecting
So Tararua was 1,800 tonne down on the previous year.
yeah.
So
So if we added that in, if for some reason they were to come back, we'd actually be ahead.
yeah, so that 1,800 tonnes is for a 12-month period. The
And this is
volumes
6
that you've
months.
got there in front of you are for a 6-month period. But if you added 900 tonne, which is half of your 12-month period, we would be back at similar sort of levels.
That's one of the key assumptions we're working through now to finalise annual plan for 25-26, which will have a, depending on the timing, just where we land this next couple of weeks, will have an impact financial year, hopefully in a positive way.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I was actually going to bring up the development contributions. So is there anything we can do to address this shortfall, or we just sort of have to accept this until things get better? Can we re-advise budget?
Yeah, so when we put together the 3-year plan recently, we revised our numbers then. We can revise them annually, so if the table wishes to, we could relook at the development contributions and the policy and the settings for the annual plan as well.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yeah.
And just the other thing, you did bring it up and you well hope, you know, we all hope for a small surplus. To allow for reinvestment or replacement and to repay debt, just about that area of repay debt. At presently, we do pay back debt, do we? Or is it just the interest component? Or do we
Correct.
do some?
Yeah, so all our loans are principal and interest. We don't have any interest only loans. The length of the loan is generally linked to the type of asset and the life of the asset. So something like I don't know, a playground, for example, might have a shorter life, for example, than a reservoir that potentially has a life of 50, 60, 70 years. So all the loans are linked to the length of the benefit that and the life expectancy of the asset. But we're definitely paying interest and principal on our loans.
So if we did have a surplus and we did want to replace something, what area do we look at? Get the best benefit? Project that's long or little loans or high loans, I suppose, would that be?
Generally speaking, this council likes to try and link its surpluses. So the area that generates the surplus. So if it was water, for example, if there was a surplus in water, we would use that to repay water debt. If there was a surplus in libraries, then we would repay the library debt. So generally, because it's linked to each rate has a different set of ratepayers, we try and keep and ring fence our surpluses to the ratepayer that is paying that. So they will then get the benefit of not having to make as much loan payments and interest payments in the future.
Thank you.
I think we discussed risk and assurance, but how much would we have to actually rate to actually fully fund replacement? It's huge, isn't it? I mean, it's not
Through
something.
you, Mr. Chair, I'll share some slides later today on.
Yeah, you know, so I think just people need to understand that that we complain about crumbling infrastructure, but people don't want huge rate increases to mean that we can just replace it.
Yeah, so we've this council and we've been upfront and honest about it through our last two LTPs. As a historical issue of underinvestment in infrastructure. So there's two parts to the answer to your question. The first part is yes, rates would have to go up slightly to basically just hold our own and have enough to reinvest to maintain the existing standard. The problem that we've got is that the existing standard isn't flash and we have to catch up on historical, which means that actually if we were fully rate funding this, it would have to be an even bigger step. So currently what council is doing is using debt to make that step change. But that does mean that we then have to service that debt. This is where the issue is both servicing that debt and continuing to maintain those assets into the future.
One question, the ANZ standby facility of 4 million. What is that?
So that's essentially like an undrawn overdraft type facility. So basically if council got to the 20th of the month and it needed to pay 6 million in creditors, but only had 4 million in the bank, we could use half of that facility. And it's just a facility that's on a day-by-day basis. So as soon as we get some extra rate money or something in, we could then repay that. So it's not
Your line of credit on that?
there is a small holding fee to maintain that line of credit. Again, I would have to find out. I have the information just not in front of me. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it is in the vicinity of 3 or 0.4%.
Anyone else? Thank you. Pamela. Recommendation is that the half yearly financial results. Richard? In favour? Aye. Go to 6.4 development. Investment strategy. Take it away, should I?
So this is possibly new to this committee because this is actually an action that's come out of Risk and Assurance Subcommittee. So every council in New Zealand is required to have an investment policy, but like a lot of councils in New Zealand, we actually have a treasury management policy that has a sub-component that talks about investments, and we utilize that as opposed to having a separate individual policy for investments by themselves. And this has worked well for this council over the last 18 dozen years because this council doesn't actually have a lot of investments and it's never really required the need to have a separate investment policy. Back in 2021, if you cast your minds back to then, the Labour government was in power and we're in the middle of what at that point was called Three Waters Reform. At that stage, the Labour government was dangling carrots in front of councils to be part of the reform process, and we're offering funds that they call no worse off and better off funding. It was hoped that as part of those funds that council would, for the first time in a while, have some surplus funds that it could then invest to create intergenerational funds that would generate income and help offset some of our rate burden into the future. That was the hope and the utopia that we were after at that point. And as part of that, I was asked as part of a Risk and Assurance Committee to develop an investment policy. However, times have changed. We are now 3 years down the track. Our investments look much the same as they did 3 years ago, and council is still in the cycle, as you've just heard in my previous report, of borrowing and updating its assets and fixing some of this intergenerational underinvestment. So currently, council doesn't have funds to invest of any significance, and its officers' opinion that the treasury management policy that has an investment component to it is fit for purpose for what we're currently doing. Obviously, if council's circumstances were to change, then this is a valid policy setting that we should review and revisit. So at Risk and Assurance, it was proposed that the outstanding action of developing a investment policy that stood alone from the Treasury management be closed, and that if circumstances changed in the future that we bring it back. They suggested that that should come to this committee for this committee to have a debate. So that's what we're bringing to you today, is basically either a recommendation to close that action or a direction to further develop a policy.
And maybe just, Mr. Chair, just to kind of add, I get like Mr. Chamberlain's point, really coming back to how proactive the committee wants to be, and again, there's future things will pop up into the future, and whether that's the conversations around the table about things like carbon credits and sale of assets and what you do with funds. So I think really it comes down to how proactive do you want to be, or at what point are the current policy settings sufficient for where you are now, versus just noting that it's still not a proactive approach for if you were to come into funds in the future, how you might deal. To again, really just seeking out some guidance in the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Can you join the dots for me, please, on the conversation we had about the future Central Hawke's Bay Fund that Councillor Annand raised in a workshop with her committee in this, because the last time we tried to talk about that was around, could we take some of our ward funds and do something like the Hawke's Bay, what's it called, and the endowment fund, to find a way to improve the returns and to secure it for the future. Can you join the dots for me on potentially what this investment policy would or would not do connected to that piece of work?
So currently under our treasury policy, we're allowed to invest into investment grade investments. So this is anything with a credit rating of A or above.
Which, excuse me, that means a bank, basically.
A bank or some reasonably large financial institute that is secure. We're allowed to invest into property. It doesn't actually preclude us from doing other things, but obviously the risk lens is more towards protecting ratepayer equity and not losing it, and making sure that we still get a return, but a high return, high risk type investment. So that's the current settings. We obviously have spoken about going out and trying to develop a community fund, which council will manage on behalf of the community. We haven't got as far as looking at the investment profile and risk profile of that fund. But again, it would have to be tempered by the fact that you're holding public money, and whether what level of risk and what level of potential investment erosion you're willing to take should the markets drop. So again, that's not a discussion we've had yet, but we could have a separate policy and investment strategy for that fund, separate from the main council fund if we chose to.
Maybe definitely that, Mr. Chair. So there's still the work that Ms. Ellis is doing in the background on, and so some of those options may well be that council doesn't hold the funds, the receipts go straight out to another. So there are different options in the longer term as well. So I think that's got to be all part of the network of things that we always work through.
So that means that if there was a proposal to have a future focused investment fund that was not in, that was in a different way, like the Hawke's Bay Foundation or some other foundation investment, you currently, the way the policy settings are, you would bring that to council and say, you recommend based on the risk profile of council and the debt profile of council that we don't do it, because any extra cash that we have should be used to pay down debt. That's the interpretation of the policy currently.
Well, again, as Mr. Tate has said, it depends on what mechanism you're holding those funds and whether they're treated as council funds or whether they're treated as a trust that's separate from council and has its own policy settings. And none of those decisions have been made yet.
I think just through you, Mr. Chair, I think there is, this is where your worship's potentially going, is in the event that funds that were eventuated, that which were clearly council funds, is how would, in what might be some of that decision-making process or not, if I'm putting words in your mouth.
Well, I where I'm trying to get to is that this policy is an articulation of our risk profile, but I don't think, and the treasury management policy is, but without the investment part, it leads every conversation to be about every extra dollar is about paying down a debt on a water pipe or fixing a pothole. Everything about this policy is geared to that core business, low risk thing. And I know the appetite at the table is very focused on that right now, but it's also very focused on how we're building a thriving community in the future. Will it shut down a conversation on if we sell the Waipokoro Library? Will it shut down a conversation that says, actually, what could we do to invest something like that for the future? Because the policy settings without that investment piece connected to it immediately lends to our chief financial officer recommending that based on our risk appetite and our current policy, we spend that money to pay off debt. And I get that, like if that's our choice, but the opportunity when we talk about this policy is actually to broaden that and go, well, how do we leverage that? Remember, we spent $25,000 on a concept that lived for Ngā Ara Tipuna, which leveraged into $3 million of externally raised funds and a really cool asset for the community, because we were, able to think creatively about how to invest for the future. We've got to get this investment piece right. How do we talk about, Councillor Aitken brings up about carbon credits all the time and trees. If we were to take that and put that into the current policy, what would be spat out? Advice that says it's high risk, we invest in banks and we pay off debt. So I just want to land that kind of tenor of conversation to the table. If that's what we want to do, cool, but this is the opportunity to potentially broaden the scope of what we're willing and able to do with the small things that we have got, which are not core infrastructure, like our ward funds. So that's why I'm asking those questions about what are the current settings send us towards.
Well, look, this isn't set in this isn't that can put in front of us at any stage. If we decide through conversation around this table that we want to invest in carbon credits, well, we just manipulate this so we can. But at the moment, the way I'm looking at it is we just adopt this as it is because we don't want to, we're not in a position to do anything. So why invest more officer time in trying to create something that's just going to sit in the bottom drawer until something does happen? Well, I look at it.
Maybe just, Mr. Chair, just kind of a bit of advice, and again, just thinking forward to the next long-term plan as well. Like I think there's possibly an opportunity that is part of that LTP process for next year, which like literally will be starting next year. As part of the program, there's an opportunity about how we potentially think about how we the treasury management policy as well. I know that sits outside of the LTP. The investment criteria is probably a key pillar of how you think about some of your future investments that will need to sit inside the LTP. So that might be something for you to, I don't know that you want to completely write it off, because I think there's some really valid points that have been raised. And again, we have a conversation in the future about a potential sale of a library or something else. We've got to have a framework in which you still think about those things. So again, looking ahead, potentially review as part of long-term plan 2026 might be another avenue for able to think about, having got through basically what is 25 as well. Again, just some further advice, just noting we've still got a lot of the year to get through yet. So
yeah, sorry, while I do agree with you, I think about the why do it now? I think it would be wrong to adjust a policy like this every time we have something to spend or do. think we should have a vision for that of what we want to do and not be able to bring it and play with it for whatever the order of the politics is on the day. Seems to be.
So Richard brought up the fact that I bring up carbon credits. I don't want to invest in carbon credits. No bloody way. The reason I bring up carbon credits is because I think it's a tax on our ratepayers that are paying for their rubbish. And I'd like to get rid of it. I think they're terrible things.
Mr. Chair, I'd be interested to know where everyone else's risk appetite on this kind of thing sits. Because silence doesn't help us move the conversation forward. So there's two leadership conversations between me and the chair, which say there's some differing views, but the silence from everyone else actually doesn't help us move the conversation forward. So is there a way for us to share some thinking?
I'm always torn in this sort of stuff because I think we're both, you know, and that's the hardest part about this role that we sit here. We're forever running up against it. Both because we've got a feet in both camps and for the right reason. We want to reduce debt, we want to reduce the burden on our taxpayer, but we also, our ratepayers, but we also want to do investments for the future because we wish that 50 years ago the people thought about us sitting here today. So we developed these kind of thoughts and ambitions at a time that the world is different. And as you talked about the federal funding and things like that, and I don't think any of that changes. And I think sadly that option has been taken from us, but I would hope that none of this closes down the ability for all of us to be able to be innovative and think outside the square should the opportunity arise. And I think, you know, all of our documents absolutely give permission to that. And I would hope that the officers know that you have permission to do that when you see those opportunities as well. Yeah, it just would be really nice to be able to restart those conversations, but at the moment we really don't have anything to start those conversations with outside of a CHB fund. And I would hope that this doesn't limit that kind of stuff. So I mean, I don't know if I've offered anything. It was just more of a reflection as to often seasons for us change, and they change from month to month sometimes. So yeah, I'd hate us to be held back from any of that good stuff, but I think we also do have to be mindful that we've got to reduce the cost to our ratepayer view as well. So and I think confidently we could probably adopt these today is what I feel that we could keep that conversation alive. And I'm not sure whether we do it through this committee or whether or not we do it through risk and assurance of the future, or whether we do it through my committee. I'm not sure. That where does it sit? Where that blue sky kind of thinking this.
So probably my advice for this, but yeah, what we think of the terms of reference in both your colleagues, this is primarily here as quite a, we're transactional, but transactional financial, this is delivery, this is getting on with it. I think there is probably just being cognizant of the wider work that's underway in terms of that kind of future fund opportunities and options that are currently just working through opportunities on. I think there is an opportunity, and I'll use again your word about kind of blue skying, about being clear about the why, the what are you trying to achieve, coming back to the strategy imperatives, and then probably an opportunity about how that might come back to this committee. So that kind of tossing it around all of the committees, that might be something in terms of the lens of where the work that's involved in that. I might call it the CHB Proud Fund, but the funding opportunities that we're working through in terms of trust models would be an appropriate place for it to land in terms of being clear about actually what are you trying to achieve. To then come back to this committee without making a big dog's breakfast of it in a big process, but actually just trying to get back to being clear on what are you actually trying to achieve. To then have some, again, more of the transactional, what's the level of financial risk counsel that you even need to take. So it might not even be a conversation for that. It's a matter of context.
Do you want to speak, Councillor Martin?
Oh, just quickly, just add on to that. I mean, at the moment, when I read this, it says until such time an investment fund becomes available. So that tells me I think should wait. I don't think it's the climate at the moment to do this, but that gives us an option if something turns up. Let's look at it then. And just that sometimes you look at these things and you can invest, but how much are you going to invest and what return do you get there? Are we going to get a few thousand or we're going to get 100,000? And sometimes you're going to look like Chamberlain said, he goes into these, so has to go to a bank thing, what the return on that is. It could become a negative return, and is it going to be inflation based? So you got to look at all these sort of things. But at the moment, I think there's an opportunity there that we can, if something turns up, we can look at it. That's my.
Are you moving the recommendation?
Yes, I am. You asked me for my ideas. So.
Oh, is that?
Okay.
You're seconded?
I'll second it.
Speak again, Councillor.
I've said it, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just go back to those words that, you know, currently we don't have the funds to be able to do anything. The climate is tough and we just got to do what's best for our community right now. And this is something that we can look to the future, but right now it's not in my focus anyway.
I'm happy to go with the recommendation that says that we don't progress any further work on doing this investment policy, but I just would remind everyone that when these difficult conversations come back to the table, and we've asked for one to come back to the table, which is about the library site in Waipukurau. And every time we have a situation where there is dollars that have not come through the traditional channels, we struggle to balance the risk averseness of the financial situation of this council and the hope and aspiration we've got to leave a long-standing legacy for our community. And as long as the table's prepared for having that challenging conversation repeatedly, then I'm okay to go with this. But it does mean we're going to come back here a few times in the near future. So I'm okay with that if that's the appetite of the table, and I'm good to go with that. But I just want to make sure everyone realises that.
And I think that'll be a test on the strength of those the chairs and the committees as well, to make sure, and not just and past us as well, but also into officers, that we're actually thinking past our specific roles and making sure that we're putting that community lens in there, that that investment lens, the reducing the debt lens, the environmental lens, all that sort of stuff, and considering it all. And I think that'll be important for us in our committees to make sure that we're always stepping up to speak that over every situation, so that it doesn't all just always go down one certain path. Yeah. So I feel confident.
Another question, Mr. Chair. If something does happen, such as the sale of the library or anything else that gives us those investment funds, this recommendation means we have to reconsider the treasury management policy. They would have to be done side by side. That the existing investment settings contained in the policy until such time as investment funds become available. So I'm assuming that as soon as investment funds become available, we need to look at the policy.
Agree, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think that's the intention. Basically, it's triggering that, Chamber. That is, it's my view that it's triggering that when you've got investment funds, you're going to need something. You're actually going to then have some policy decisions to make, likely greater than the 1 or 2% that you receive from a conservative.
Mr. Chair, when does that library paper come to? Councillor Ward,
Through you, Mr. Chair, just looking to confirm,
in the next couple of months.
probably.
Yeah, just it's in front of us to be able to look at to change now, and if we're gonna have to bring it up in a couple of months anyway. You know, we will, yeah. I'll go with the majority.
You know, I'll just add, where we are at the moment with with very high debt level, and all tied up with three waters. It's not until there's a decision made on three waters until we can deal with that debt. But you don't be in a position to do anything. There might be the odd thing come up like the library, and I think that's what we're here for, to make those decisions. I don't think we should have a policy where it just follows a policy straight down. We can change it any. The climate out there changes all the time, so you don't want to be bound by policy all the time. So yeah, I'm in favour of just investigation. Anything else? Oh, you want to speak?
Yes, please.
Yep.
I think the language that I'm hearing is that actually people don't want to look at policy. Is that actually they just want to make ad hoc decisions. And that's okay, but it's just that we have had the experience of, we actually do have funds potentially to invest because we've got ward funds that don't have a tagged purpose currently. So we actually have the capacity to do something if we chose to do so. And the last time we did do that, this policy was used as the reason to not move forward. So it means that we're reinterpreting the risk appetite basically over and over on it. So I don't think that we'll basically have the same conversation about investment strategy, but it will be coloured by the particular imperative of a particular piece of money and a particular piece of infrastructure that's in front of us at that time. It's not necessarily through the lens of what is the right financial decision for the business to make and the right investment decision for the community's future to make. So I just wanted to add that additional piece there. But I think the resolution saying that we would come back and look at the strategy again is counterintuitive, but because we'll just have the same conversation over it.
We've always had those ward funds though, but they've sort of been treated like a stock for one-off event. So we've got some money, so I think it's changed there.
But based on a set of assumptions, Mr. Chair, based on a set of assumptions that the staff are having to interpret the colour of the day in terms of what the assumptions are that are going to hold true. And the last time we talked about was the potential to take that ward fund and invest it in a different way, which was not a bank, to try and improve the returns so that we could do more with it. It got shut down because of the Treasury management policy that didn't have investment settings in it. So we have talked about that before. The possibility of how do we turn that just under $1 million into $2 million over the next 10 years? What is it that we would need to do that? The current policy settings shut down our ability to explore that. Yeah. Well, I just did, but.
Anything else, Councillor? Right. The recommendation is that the finance and infrastructure committee retains the existing investment settings contained in the Treasury management policy until such time as investment funds become available and a more expensive investment strategy becomes necessary. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yes. Very. Big water story.
So through you, Mr. Chair, thanks for the opportunity to bring the latest key project status report for the water story. I'm standing in for Mark today because had a wee accident this morning, nothing major. It's just went to pick up his bag and he had a back spasm and ended up on the floor, but he's now in bed. It's not just, let's not that distract from what Rebecca's Miss England's going to say.
Good morning all. The report that you've got in front of you today is a report on the progress of our drinking water programme of works. First of all, I'd just like to highlight some of the progress that we've been making across our renewals programme. Specifically, we've got in there the completion of construction at Francis Drake Street, the construction that's underway on Racecourse Road, and the soon to commence work on Homewood Road as well. So there's a lot of good work happening in the renewals for our drinking water supply at the moment. Other key items to mention include the Waipawa water treatment plant upgrade and relocation. This project, you can see, has made good progress in the last few months, but does have a delay from the original intended deadline. We're actually intending in the next couple of weeks to award the platform contract, which is the first stage of physical works there, and that'll be commencing this financial year. Other key items to mention talk more to the strategy and work that we're completing with Mr. Swinburne at the moment. Our PDT team and the asset management team are working together to prioritise both the renewal projects, but also the wider drinking water programme. That is seen within our work that's commenced on the Pukeora Reservoir project. It's not listed as an active project because at the time of writing this report, it wasn't. But since then, we've worked to commence our investigation and options consideration for that project, and we'll be bringing a paper back to the council table in the near to distant future, considering the programming and sequencing of that selection of work there against our second supply project. So there's a bit of work that we'll be doing in the coming months on that item. And the final thing that I just wanted to mention as well is that throughout all of the projects across this supply, we're working on improving, and across the PDT as well, our financial budget management processes. So in the coming quarters report, the next one, you'll see further information added that will talk to more of that, as well as further information on the asset management and strategy of the wider drinking water programme. Other than that, happy to take the report as read and answer any questions if there are any.
Yes, thank you. Just in the regards to the Homewood Road water renewal. Potentially, it could be on page 38.
Yep.
Potentially there could be a risk of that will exceed the project budget. We got a tentative solution on how we could try and navigate the funding gap. Well, if it does decide to go over budget, over 100 grand, will we have to go to another project and cut that back, or is there a way that we may be able to sort that problem out?
Through you, Chair, at the time of writing, Mr. Swinburne might be able to add more of the recent progress on this for me. We've been working with our contractor and the team to ensure that we are getting best value for money on that project. If the project does exceed the current allocated budget, we do have other already budgeted within the annual plan, this financial year, renewals funding that could be allocated to this specific project, therefore increasing its budget. Well, let Mr. Swinburne add to that as well.
Mr. Chair, yeah, so just to add to that, so since the time of writing the report, we've been able to work with the project delivery team to reduce the expected cost of completion down by approximately $100,000. That's a combination of working with the contractor and some refinement of our budgetary numbers. Obviously, that does result in still a small overspend versus the originally forecasted budget. That is able to be offset with the program due to the fact that the Francis Drake Street project has been delivered under budget as well. So across the program of the renewals, we're still tracking on budget.
My question is, what has actually happened in the last month? Resource consent application. River crossing, sorry.
Through you, Chair, for the second supply river crossings, I believe the team at the moment are working on drafting the consent application. At this point in time, it has not been submitted. The next steps for us alongside preparing the actual application documentation is engagement. So that when we enter into the consenting process, the stakeholders that will be involved in the consultation with regional council are already a part of the discussion with CHBDC.
Is there any movement on setting up meetings to consult with interested parties?
Through your chair, that's planned in the coming month or so.
Through you, Chair, there's been engagement with get this wrong now that I've put on the spot to say the name. Pamatia Whenua. Di Smith, we've been connecting with her and they've moved, she's moving her department down here every Friday. So we're just trying to make sure there's a open channel so we can engage with them. That's just starting. We've also programmed a my Māori words have gone away from our pōwhiri. Now looking at you, it helps. Sorry. So pōwhiri organised for the PDT team in early May, so that we can go down there regularly and engage with Diane Smith on a regular basis to address that. So we're trying to open those channels.
We can get you there as a detailed breakdown for your next meeting and as well in terms of progress, and breaking down on one page doesn't give you any of the breakdown methodology of kind of key program and those sorts of things. So
there is quite a bit of activity happening in those two work streams regards that. Is the river crossings is the optioneering report, which must be just about due to appear in the officer's hands, which is a prelude to the application going in, and the looking at the options. I know WSP, the consultant, have been engaged to look at the options regards the reservoir sites. So those two work streams are working at the moment.
Yeah, we just got a bit of some dates put in place where, you know, we want to do this by this stage, and so, you know, we can follow it through, so we can see we're going to hit problems. So it just doesn't say in the coming months, so we know exactly where we are the whole time.
Through you, Chair, we have also a workshop programmed in the future month. I think it's later in March, where we'll be able to give you that detail.
Just for clarity, this is going under the river, correct? Consent. That's the one you're looking at.
That is the option that is preferred at the moment.
Which one?
And just in terms of communication, so Pōkai Whenua, Komite Pōkai Whenua, they've said yes, they support this. That's still the conversation still to have.
Chair, it's early engagement only that's taken place with them, and we know that we need to expand that further. That was the planning that I was referring to earlier.
So just probably just to note, particularly in terms of previous engagement in this space, like we've done a lot of work previous years as well, and it's making sure that we are not repeating some of that work that we've done. We're actually making sure that we are aligning ourselves with the right groups, but actually setting up a process that it's appropriate for the previous conversations that have happened, some of the learnings that we've taken, but also some of the other activities that we've done. So again, key part of the kind of program that the team needs.
When can we please have a governance and leadership meeting about how to navigate those conversations? Because it seems like we were talking about Mount Whenua engagement. Now it's obliquely been removed, and the offer was there from me to spend some time with officers to map out how to make this happen, and with our Whirinaki who are here in the wisdom of the governance table to help make that happen as well, and that offer hasn't been taken up. So I would suggest that is probably an important next step, because we've got a whole field of officers who are new to this project and for the conversations and the guidance that should be able to come from this table is really important to navigating it. We were the ones in the room last time, so we need to provide some advice on how to move it forward.
Great. And
So next week,
yet.
we have a meeting.
We'll confirm.
Yeah, kia ora.
Otherwise, we're just talking past each other.
We are.
Thank you, Pete. Recommendation is that committee notes, story status report, February 25. Over. That's the career. Over.
Can I just add something, Mr. Chair? Just in doing so, look, we've been working really hard to get our delivery in the water space back on track. It's so cool to see that renewal work happening. So thank you for that work you guys have been doing to drive that forward. You know, the flagship project for how to set us up for resilience is that second supply, and I think there's certainly appetite for how we look at that as the flagship project. But I would also point out that the previous resolutions of council were about going forward to the exploring the going under the river for the second supply, but it also had about the environmental and risk impacts that needed to be looked at as well. So there was climate change modelling, flood modelling, and the geotech risks of the going under the river that still needed to be reported back as well. And so, you know, we have got history with this project, and I'm really keen to make sure that the wisdom of the governance table is closely connected to help navigate that forward. But really exciting to see this stuff carrying on. Well done.
All in favour?
Right.
All right. Date of the next meeting. Actually, we meet,
Should be finance infrastructure.
Get held on the 24th of April, 2025. Second, Councillor Annan. In favour?
Aye.
Right, one in FIFA. More questions? Oh. On that, the resolution that we've made to excluded business. Now, there's a resolution monitoring report. It's also a regional deals application. And the services consultant. And procurement extension. And then second, over. Right, to those online, we open to the public for the transport committee meeting at 1 o'clock. So you